Hey everyone, this is Ian Carlin from the Empty Cup podcast. I'm so glad you could make it to the show today. You are listening to the podcast in which modern and traditional martial arts collide, and we dissect what is left over. And I think that tagline probably applies today more than just about any episode that I've done so far, because today on the program we have Michael Wynn and Aaron Garcia. Now, you guys may not know these people by that name, but they run a channel called Karate Culture. And if you're interested in like reality-based martial arts or anything like that, I bet you've seen probably their most popular video called Okinawan Karate, the original MMA. So I'm gonna guess that if you don't know these people by their name, you know that video, and you probably have an opinion about that video. So we're going to let these guys give them a chance to put their best foot forward and talk about the legitimacy of karate and the legitimacy of practicing kata today on the program. And again, hi gentlemen, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Ian? Thanks for having us.
Oh yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you. Now, before we jump into the meat of the subject, I kind of want to give, I know that everybody's got, I tell everybody I've got a long story and I've got a longer story in martial arts. So as quickly as you can, because I know there's probably a lot of issues we want to get to, tell us both a little bit about what got you interested in martial arts, how long you've been practicing martial arts, and what type of karate that you do currently. And any one of you can start. You can start Aaron, or you can start Michael. I don't care, whichever. I want to hear from both of you, though.
I'll let the old guy take it first.
Okay, so all right, so you'll pay for that later.
Okay.
So I guess what got me interested was how are we on language? Because sometimes stuff comes out of my mouth.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I don't stifle it. It's so if you want to drop some curse words or something, I'm not gonna trip. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll try to be as polite as I can, just because. So like when I was younger, I got my butt handed to me a few times by, people. Like when I was really young, like say maybe 4th, 5th grade. So I guess that's what kind of pushed me into like wanting to learn how to defend myself.
Okay.
I guess that's when I started like looking for, I did Taekwondo for a while. And after that, when I got into like kind of high school and stuff, then I kind of transferred into doing Shotokan. Did that for a good, like, I don't know, maybe like 5, 6 years, so even a little bit after that. And then did some Muay Thai for a little while after that, not very long though. Had a brief stint, some instruction in Judo, and then after that when I went back to the Valley, which is where I'm from. Found our last sensei. That's when where I kind of stuck with Short and Ryu, and it's been doing that ever since. Just kind of expanding on that, since that seems to be the thing that has made the most sense for me, rather, I guess, as far as like using karate and applying it, kind of deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Shorin-ryu is the art that's the karate that you do currently?
Yeah, that's currently it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Michael, let's hear from you if you can catch us up to date with your martial arts background.
Sure. Just to add on to what Aaron was saying, it's kind of like the style that we chose, it's really what you decide is the flavor of your life at that moment in time, right? Like everybody has the style that they gravitate towards, and it's how you want to branch out from that. And we believe every style is complete. It's just how you want to train it that way. But for myself, I would say I started off because of my parents. My dad was very into Kung Fu movies growing up, so I grew up with that playing constantly throughout the house, throughout my childhood. I started Kung Fu when I was 5, and then did that for a few years. I was the only one out of my family that stuck with it. Continued Kung Fu into middle school. In high school, I found an after-school program that allowed me to do Kyokushin, Ishinryu, Kaji Kempo, and that was taught by police officers. So like they had always a self-defense flair to that. When that program ended, I found a Shorin-ryu school, got ranked up in that, and then started a club in college. and that allowed me to keep up my craft and also like explore on my own. But I would say most of the growth came when we met our current sensei, ex Green Beret Special Forces. He's currently Border Patrol. I guess he's retired now, but he really brought that conceptual approach to martial arts that I guess was missing from both of our journeys up until that point. Because generally speaking, you think of a karate class, you do your basics, and then the sensei teaches the technique, and you drill that technique, and then you go on and move on to something else, or you learn a technique and you compile a list of techniques, right? But our sensei was really into driving that idea of learning concepts. That way you can put them back into the katas that you know, and then from there you can create your own, techniques or your own self-defense applications from what you are training yourself, right? So I guess our biggest premise after we understood that was, why are karate schools learning kata, drilling them for years, and then when they spar, it looks completely unrelated, right? So
right. Well, I think that's what everybody's issue is, and and I had that issue myself. My first actual karate that I went into when I was a kid at 8 years old was Ishinryu karate. And I actually even got to meet Steve Armstrong. I don't know if you know who he was. He was the Grand Master when I was a kid, and I remember, and I was just a little kid. I got I think an orange belt or something like that in that, and that's before I got into the Tong Soo Do system that I got into. But it's very interesting because what you're saying is okay, they're doing these movements, but then these movements you're not doing that when you're fighting.
Right.
And so there seems to be this disconnect between okay, it almost seems like, you can be a really good fighter and be a karate guy, but that's in spite of kata, not because of kata. That's what people think.
Right.
But you know what I mean? That's what people think. And I know that what you guys are doing, part of what you're trying to put forth, is the legitimacy of kata in the actual sparring or the actual self-defense aspect.
Right.
So what brought you guys to do that? What made that your passion and your goal?
I would say part of it is just having the sense of duty to bring everyone else down, right? Because it's that sounds kind of weird, but it's a lot of people fall back on, we shouldn't use kata in real life because it's too deadly. That's kind of like a cop-out saying, right? You hear it all the time. But if you're not under resistance, under pressure testing your kata movements, then of course it's not going to work. And then it's just, everything's just going to downgrade towards looking like a street fight or a cat fight or even worse, right? So we really just, it didn't make sense that for hundreds, thousands of years, old styles were training patterns and forms to learn how to fight and survive life or death altercations. But then modern society thinks that combative sports is the real deal, is the only answer, right? So we I guess our passion is a pushback against that. So
yeah, I would say that's exactly it, right? It's kind of how can you say you're a karate guy and then never actually use karate? It aggravated me. I think more than anything else, I just found it really annoying, right? That's because kicking and punching isn't karate. That's not every system kicks and punches, right? Except for boxing.
Right.
So yeah, it just didn't make any sense. So that just kind of, just that fact alone is kind of what kind of pushed me to want to kind of well, so then why, so then what does it all mean really? Right? So it's the search, right? So how could it all survive for so long? And how can every system out there, in their traditions and their history, have stuff like that? The Jeet Kune Do comes from something. The even Sistema and all those other systems come from something else.
Right.
that in those ideas. So why is everything downgraded into just kicks and punches, right? So yeah, it just makes you. It just. I think it made me in particular just want to figure that out. Then once it started, you're figuring it out. It just kind of snowballed, right?
Yeah.
Right. So after your guys's, because I've done, and I've known people in karate, you just being a martial artist for many years and doing my own, doing karate and doing Tang Soo Do, and going through kind of like, well, we do this when we do our forms or when we do our katas, and we do this when we're sparring, and then just meeting people over and over in karate. I've kind of developed an idea, and then I watched your guys' video, and I thought, well, this is really cool, because one of the things that I saw a long time ago was, and this was on a VHS tape, was an application of Gojo karate, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool stuff. But I want to run this by you guys, and you tell me what you think. I'll try to run this by as quickly as possible. But because my audience has heard me say this before, I put it out on a karate vlog, and I've said it a few times. But I want to explore what's the disconnect between the kata and the fighting. How did that happen, and what's the solution, if there is a solution, to bring them together? So here's my little take on it, and you tell me what you think. I'm not technically a karate practitioner at this point. I'm more of a JKD practitioner, if there's anything, JKD Wing Chun. So you tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. This is just from observing your videos and observing the years that I've had contact with karate. So here it goes. Okay, number one, we've lost the meaning of what those moves actually mean. I think that newer forms of karate and newer senseis don't know what some of those moves mean. So let me run these by you. So for instance, I saw one time, so you got like, say, an inward block, which you would, like this to this, which I learned in Tang Soo Do, which I would never use in a fight. But I saw an older karate guy use almost that same movement, but not as a block. What he did was he grabbed the guy by the shirt, held him out at arm's distance, and used this as a hammer fist on his head.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's some legit shit right there. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. See, right. So what was taught to me of what it meant and what it actually could have meant were two different things. So that's one. So the second thing is newer types of karate, and I'm talking anything from almost from 1950s on. Their newer katas didn't take some of that old, actual realistic stuff into consideration. Right. And then the third thing is it's not pressure tested. They don't pressure test these movements at all to see if they would actually work. What do you think about that?
I would say all those theories are sound.
Yeah, yeah.
And we also try to push the idea that kata is a muscle memory building tool, and it's movement patterns, right? Not a specific thing. So we always say, we actually got back from a seminar yesterday, and we always tell people that once you put a label to something like an inward block, you put it into a box, right? But instead call that like an inward motion of your arm or your forearm. And then you can apply it at different ranges, apply it at different limbs, apply it on the ground against the wall, at a tall guy, with a short guy, etc. And then it stops becoming a block, it just becomes a movement, right? So that kind of goes back to since we know this, it doesn't mean that karate is dead. It doesn't mean let's go to Chinese Kung Fu because that has more legit things, right? Or it doesn't mean let's go to MMA because they're pressure testing and we're not. It means karate needs to change their methodology to modern times. So yes,
that's brave of you. Have you gotten pushback on that? Have people said no, we shouldn't? Or I mean, if you're saying karate needs to, anytime you say karate needs to X, you're going to get a bunch of traditionalists who say no, it doesn't.
Right. But I mean, that would be really presuming they're traditional, right? Right. I mean, that depends on how you're defining that.
Okay, go ahead. Go with that.
Well, I mean, that's just
how far back do you?
How far back are you going?
Right.
I mean, to whose tradition? tradition of going out to a bar and picking a fight.
Yeah, they're Okinawans
Like,
that
I
did
mean,
that, right?
Yeah, but that's that. I mean, how traditional do you want to be? I mean, so that I don't go and saying like, well, that's the tradition of Jichin Funakoshi. I mean, he's new. He's a new guy, right? I mean, that's new karate. That's new age karate as far as I'm concerned. You know, so
I don't know that reference. I'm sorry if you can explain it.
He's like
Founder
the founder of Shotokan.
Oh, okay.
So like he was like one of the guys who really that's like when a really big change in karate happened from Okinawa to Japan, and it's just it's totally different.
You see that as a good change or as a bad change?
It just depends on what you're trying to use it for. I mean, for what he was using it for, it's totally fine. You know, applying it to like their society was totally different from Okinawan society, right? It's not the same. So just how it's being used, you know, and that changes what that animal is, right?
When you go towards like self-cultivation or drilling as a means to better yourself and understand your being in the world, then you kind of lose that sense of urgency to learn things for a practical reason, right?
Yeah.
So.
And you know, I think like the other thing, you know, everything that you said about the whole thing of like exploring the use of kata for fighting and self-defense. I think one of the fallacies of humanity, right, is that everybody is looking for the easiest answer, and it's way easier just to throw punches and kicks than to have to like figure out like what's a more efficient way of doing things, right? Because it seems like, well, yeah, if you could just hit somebody with one fist and knock them out, like, hey, great, right? It's like, but how often does that happen? I mean, there are flash knockouts, and yeah, it does happen, but the majority of the time, I mean, if that was always the case, then we wouldn't have, you know, 3 10-minute round fights, you know, or 5 5-minute round fights, or 12 3-minute round fights. You know, I mean, you know, I don't know, like it just. So I mean,
yeah,
that's an easy way out, right? To say like, well, all that kata stuff doesn't work. It's just easier to kick and punch somebody, you know. Where it's like, you know how you were saying like the whole idea of that round block. Well, that technique. Well, it's like, okay, if you just do that particular move, it's like, okay, apply that move to somebody's arm while you're holding it at arm's length. Okay, apply that move to the arm when it's bent, when you're closer.
Right.
Move to somebody's face when it's leaning into you. Apply that move to the leg while you're holding on to it. So it no longer then becomes about like there's a singular definition or singular use for any one technique. It's just doing that technique to whatever thing is in front of you at that point in time.
Right. And I can identify with that with the Wing Chun training that I've had, because, you know, I know the forms, and I don't really, you know, I don't really teach Wing Chun anymore. I've more evolved. Went back to JKD, but I understand. Like, I've had students like I'll show like a basic movement like Lao Sao, which is basically a scooping hand, which, you know, goes down and then up, and a basic understanding of that is scooping a kick. But I've also done it to where somebody's charged at me and I've scooped their head, or they've come in with a punch and I've scooped them under the arm and thrown them backwards. So there's not like this is this, you know. And I understand that, you know, it's true. It's and you kind of when you pressure test, you start learning what works for you, you know, which part of it that you kind of like evolve toward.
There's so many ways. There's only so many ways the human body can move, right? So it's all going to relate to each other in some form or fashion.
Right. Now, I don't mean to be like, I know that I don't really appeal to a large karate culture, so to speak, pardon the pun, my podcast. So I don't mean to be like rude to like other styles of karate. But you were talking a while back about into Shotokan, and it seems to me that the evolution of karate from Okinawan karate to Japanese karate seems to be like, when I look at Okinawan karate, it looks way more fluid. The stances are not as deep. But on occasion, you can drop into like a lower stance, but it's for the most part. But then when you go and you start to go into Japanese karate and then go into Korean karate, it seems like the stances get deeper, the movements get more square, and it seems that it loses its, like, it seems like the Okinawans were the ones who were actually kind of using this, and as a result of using it, the movements seem to be more fluid and less kind of square and sharp. You know, does that make sense? Or
yeah. And also keep in mind, the Okinawans grew up doing sumo. There's like an indigenous art of sumo that all the Okinawans boys practice, like roughhousing after school with your friends, right? So that was actually their base. They added strikes from the Chinese afterwards, you know? So like you grapple, so understanding that like having a base in grappling versus a base in striking changes your approach to a lot of things. Leverage is different, the distance management is different, all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
right. So are you guys familiar with Adam Chan? No, he does a thing called the Kung Fu Report, and somebody asked him one time about forms and the legitimacy of forms. And I want to run this by you guys and have you riff on it. Tell me what you think of this. That he basically said, like, when you're looking at a kata, and you're asking if it's good or not. He said that's like reading a dictionary and saying, was that a good novel?
right.
You know, people learn differently. Some people learn a different language through talking. They just talk and then they learn. And some people learn through like book learning. They really like to get into the grammar of the situation. Like what are the syntax if I'm going to learn a different language, you know, whatever. But he's like saying, to say like katas suck or whatever, that's like looking at the dictionary and saying that was a crappy novel.
Right. Like we always push the idea that karate becomes you after a certain amount of time, right? So I totally agree. It becomes, you learn a pattern that's passed down and you drill it so much that it formulates to how your body moves. And then your applications are how you're mentally emphasizing those applications as well, right? Like my style versus Aaron's style is totally different. Someone who kicks a lot in karate doesn't mean they're doing taekwondo, right? They just have karate with a lot of kicks. I mean, again, it goes back to the art itself is a very individual journey. Although you claim that you're a karate guy or a taekwondo guy, it's all just martial arts, right? It's all just movement. So
it is all movement. Now I want to ask you a kind of a controversial question. Were there things about your discovery in this that you did say, well, this is kind of bullshit? You know, I think that this doesn't work, or this is impractical, or, you know, something of that nature. Was there anything in your experience where you did say, hey, look, it looks like maybe this is a better way to do things than we've been doing them? Anything at all?
Every single session.
Yeah.
So the thing is, like, think of the typical martial artist. They go to class, they put on their gi, they train 2-3 times a week, they go home and they forget about everything, right? And then they go back to class and then they're in their martial art mindset. But if you break away from that and just think about martial arts all the time, and you're drilling all the time, and you're just visualizing all the time, like there was a moment in time where we were meeting up maybe 3-4 hours every day for over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years, just messing around with these concepts. And what you see on video is like the results of hundreds, thousands of trials and errors that just didn't work. And then what we put on camera is what actually worked out. So there's no secret to it. It's literally like you put in the work, you figure out what does work and what doesn't work. There's, I would say, 99% of things on YouTube that's karate related is total BS.
It's nonsense.
It's
nonsense. A lot of it's nonsense. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's like some of it's so like formulaic.
Yeah.
Right. Like it just.
We're sending stuff back and forth to each other throughout the day.
Yeah, just like, did you see this thing? Can you believe he's teaching this stuff? You know, yeah. And it's like that's a real weird subject, or it's not weird. It's touchy for some people because it's like you know, they just they grew up believing this like thing is like, and it's like their canon, right? And and like anything that kind of like pushes them to think about it in a different way, kind of like it. I mean, it just sometimes you get met with like kind of like animosity or something like that sometimes, and it's just kind of like you know, I'm not telling you what you're doing is wrong, and generally we don't say that to people, right? I mean, if you want to do stuff your way, that's your way, man. Like, that's fine.
At the end of the day, we're still training for ourselves, right? And
so but we'll be like, hey man, did you ever think that maybe, you know, like this technique would be better utilized like this, right? Like, and I think that comes from like, you know, a lot of people just not pressure testing it. So like, I mean, you know, when we work on stuff together and when we were training with our students and stuff like that, you know, we had that like one of our students he was like 6'3" and 230 pounds. You know, he's a big guy. So it was good having him around when we did, because we could run stuff on him, we could train stuff on him, and see how things didn't function well, and some things did function really well.
And then pressure testing doesn't mean like hurting each other.
Yeah,
right?
it just means providing resistance.
There's a progression to it.
Yeah. So like, you know, we would do, and what's really funny about pressure testing those movements is that as you bring up the intensity, the movement itself starts to change, right? So you technique at about like 20-30% resistance, and you're like able to complete it, and it's okay. And then you start adding more resistance, and we'll be like, okay, like give me a little more, give me like 50-60%, you know, like maybe work for it. And then you start seeing like it kind of changes, and then by the time you get up to like, you know 80-90%, you know, it's the movement's completely changed. So then you went to something else, and then you found out, like, you figure out like, wait, that's that transition between this technique and this. So you're like, holy crap, it wasn't really about the first or the second technique, it's about the change between them. So sometimes it happens, you know, so it wasn't about the inside block to the turnaround. It was that space in between where you're like holding onto somebody's arm and pinning it to your body, right? It's like
forced to lower your center of gravity, use your body weight, having to torque your elbows a different way so that it can fit into a space that isn't there anymore, right? When you add up the resistance.
So like our sensei, and I said this at the last seminar too, and that's the one thing that really started to get my mind to think about stuff differently in karate, was when he said, the techniques in the katas are not the actual technique. It's the end of the technique. They're showing you the end of the movement. The technique is what happens in between the beginning and the end of that step. Right? It's a follow through, right? So like the swing, the hitting of the ball with the bat is not when your bat's across your shoulder, right? It's that space in between. It's the swing, right? So if you start thinking about all your katas and your techniques like that, well, it starts changing how you're applying them, what the heck you're doing with them. I think that was like
I agree with that. I've experienced that myself, and particularly in my Wing Chun training, because you do have, you know, forms in Wing Chun, and you know, I'm telling students all the time, well, I used to when I was teaching Wing Chun, that you look at a book and it shows Bong Sao, and it's like it starts here, and then the next thing it's there. I'm like, that's not Bong Sao. Bong Sao isn't here and here. Bong Sao is this movement. It's the movement itself. It's not the end result. And this is why part of training in Wing Chun is difficult to do with a book, because it's, you know, you need somebody there to explain, like, okay, you know, I have somebody's arm pinned, and it's not I drop and do a horse stance. It's that movement of grabbing the arm and dropping into the horse stance. That is pulling the person down. That's the actual movement. That's the actual movement. So I think that if I hear you folks correctly, in order to solve this issue that's going on in karate, and it is an issue that I think is going on, I think not in just karate, but any system that has forms, specific forms, and they want to legitimately fight. that understanding the movement has a big issue with bridging that gap.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're teaching that movement, like those techniques, and you're telling people you're supposed to catch like a flying fist in midair, I mean, you've already like really kind of screwed up, because I don't know of too many people who can do that.
And the problem with most martial artists is they'll believe it, right?
Yeah,
and
like
you got to take hold of your own stuff, of yourself. That's a big thing we kind of push too, right? Because it's like, take the reins of your training. Don't take things at face value, because like even if he has been training for 40 years,
he's just a man. Like at some point he gets buried too, dude. Like I mean, it's like we're all just people, right? So I mean, even the things like, I mean, even things that we say about stuff, it's we try to do as best as we can to figure out stuff in a way that it's applicable to just about everything. But that doesn't mean there's going to be some dude that's not going to work for it, right? That doesn't exist. Like, I mean, that happened with that dude at that seminar where it's like, you know, what was the Warren? You know, that guy's like 6'4", 6'5", something ridiculous, and you're teaching a technique to. They're saying like, okay, well, this is how that movement's supposed to work, and you have a dude who's like 5'7" walking up to it. It's like, well, come on, like you can't apply it to him anymore, man. Like he doesn't. He's an outlier, right? Yeah, you got to change what you're doing and figure something else out.
Right. So let me ask you this: you guys both train jiu-jitsu? Am I correct about that? I know I've seen you guys grapple. You guys both train jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, both. We've been training for about 5-6 years. I was part of the Gracie Baja Association. They're Pedro Sauer's association, but we're still training that 3-4 times a week.
Yeah, Pedro Sauer's in Salt Lake here in Utah.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, cool. Yeah. I have a friend. My first encounter with jiu-jitsu was this was years and years ago. But he was a purple belt under Pedro Sauer. He's now a 3rd-degree black belt under Pedro Sauer. But yeah, Pedro Sauer's he's incredible.
Yeah, very technical.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question: Are you guys like? Would you guys? And Aaron, you've also been in jiu-jitsu as well.
Like I used to. So it's not my. I wouldn't say it's my favorite thing to do.
He's just good at it.
I'm decent at it just because like because of I also did gymnastics when I was a kid, and I really lost that flexibility or that like knowing how my body works and moves.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, all we did was roughhouse and wrestle, like pretty much, I don't know, every day, like from middle school up until. Like hell, even into high school a little bit. I don't even know why that happened, but I don't know. Maybe it's just where I grew up, man. I don't know. But that happened, so I got used to being thrown around and throwing other people around. So then add that with karate, and then I would just go to open mats with Michael, and I would just be able to hang, with various colors.
Like judo in college as well.
Yeah, and I took judo for a while too, so that kind of always weirded people out. They'd be like, "Well, have you done jiu-jitsu? Why are you wearing a white belt?" And I was like, "Well, I did a lot of other stuff,
We take freestyle wrestling lessons.
Yeah,
with Coach too.
So let me ask you this question, because I think one of the problems that I do have with karate that you guys are aware of, you guys have brought it up, and I talked about the 3-pronged approach of why I think there's this disconnect between kata and actual fighting is there's so much non-pressure testing in karate. It's almost like a cooperative sport, at least in some emanations of it.
Yeah.
But when you go to jiu-jitsu, you're on the opposite end. You're dealing with somebody who's using all their strength and their weight to stop you from doing something and trying to choke you or armbar you or knee bar you or whatever. They're not cooperating. Cooperating. Right. They're using resistance. To me, that seems for a lot of people that mentality, once they experience that, it opens their eyes to other things. Did that play a factor in it for you guys when you started doing like this full non-resistance? Did you go, okay, so what about that inward block or that dropping to the straddle stance? Does, you know, can I do that under pressure? Did jiu-jitsu help you at all in making that explore, you know, opening your eyes to this?
What's
Or did it
funny
not
is
play a
like we
factor?
yeah, well, we came from a very pressure testing karate school as well. So our sensei actually was the one that told us, if you want to get good at the stuff on the ground that I'm showing you, just find a jiu-jitsu school and do that. So that's actually I started jiu-jitsu because my karate instructor said, go start jiu-jitsu, come back and share what you learned. So he was very open-minded like that, and we also did a lot of resistance training in karate class. So jiu-jitsu just felt like a drill for the times we did grappling in karate class. That's how I would say it. It was like karate has all these facets to it, right? Punching, kicking, throws, groundwork, whatever, joint manipulation. So then I wanted to specialize in all of them, so I found the specific disciplines to do that. So therefore, I wanted to get better at my karate throws, so I joined a judo school. I wanted to get better on the ground, so I joined the jiu-jitsu school. But it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't like a eye opener or anything like that. We're very fortunate to find a karate school that was pressure testing. I wouldn't say that all of the majority of karate schools do that. So maybe other people had different experiences, but I would say for us it was just the norm.
See, yeah, where I came from, we didn't pressure test anything in kata. I should say that. And that was kind of why I was like, you know, I mean, we would fight, but it basically just turned into kickboxing. You know, and this was back before 93, before, you know, the Gracies took the world by storm and everything. Everything was basically stand up, and about the most violent thing that you could get was Kyokushin matches, you know. So, but when I went into those matches, when I would do full contact sparring, we weren't using any kata. You know, as far as, I'm not going to say we weren't using any kata, but you know what I mean. It wasn't, we weren't told that this could be this movement or anything like that. It basically turned into kickboxing, and gosh, I was going somewhere with that. I totally forgot where I was going, but I guess that you guys are pressure testing then your movements from your kata.
Yeah.
Am I correct about that?
That's correct. And also it was the driving force for why we started that channel on YouTube. Like both Aaron and I, like we like to stay low and not have our face in public areas, but I was getting to the point where I was tired of just seeing like bad quality karate in a public space. So it was like, there's no one else out there doing it. So let's show what we have and test the waters. And like, fortunately, we had a positive response from it. So we just there. So
now, did you get any negative backlash?
For every one positive is probably 20 negative.
Yeah, I mean, there's always negative stuff out there. I mean, it's kind of it's comical.
Yeah, it doesn't get to us.
Yeah, it's all right. Like, people are allowed to have opinions, right? Like,
I screenshot all the negative stuff and just laugh at it at times. So
what? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I screenshot a lot of negative comments on my phone and just like share it to people because it's kind of funny what people say. So it really doesn't get to us.
Okay. Where is the majority of the negative comments coming from? Are they coming from traditionalists, or, well, what you would consider what we would normally consider traditionalists, or is it from MMA folks, or is it a combo?
I would say majority would be mixed martial arts fans, or even people who want us to pressure test even more. I feel like people will just want to see blood on camera, right? So, and it's hard to learn anything when you're just watching a violent confrontation. So a lot of our videos, we kind of slow things down because they are teaching tools for a lot of people as well. But that also brings the backlash that we aren't going hard enough. So that's part of it. The other side of that is a lot of traditionalists who say, this is exactly what we've been doing. You guys are this is right. Like we've also been training this way in our own dojo, which I find pretty, I guess, is funny as well.
Yeah, because it's like, well, where the hell have you guys been? You know, like
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it's funny because, you know, the whole like MMA thing. It's like you never know. Like I don't know who any of those people are who are you know, they're, and I don't even know why I say anything negative, right? Like I don't get that either. Like
Yeah.
just to, I guess.
Well, I think the concern, and this is my concern, and this is not my concern with you guys, but it's my concern in a lot of martial arts that I've had my eyes open to. For instance, when I was even an advanced student in Wing Chun, and I got taken to the ground by that purple belt and locked out, I went back to class and I heard, you know, people, they would just bag on groundwork. Like, oh, you don't need to do that. If you just know Wing Chun better, you're going to do this, do that, you know, and I'm like, well, that's all great as long as it's theoretical. Yes, if he jumps in and I pox out the back of his head as he comes in, then yeah, theoretically I won. But guess what? That didn't happen to me. What happened was I got taken down and I got locked out. I got, you know, locked out. One time I got locked out in an armbar, and the other time I couldn't escape out. I was a total fish out of water. Yeah. But I think the concern that people have and is that are you selling something? Are you saying, hey, this will work to protect you, and then have somebody find out that it doesn't work? So, for instance, I think one thing that an example of this that we can all agree on is the, you know, no touch knockout BS that's out there. You know, these guys are, they're full of it, and they're going to show something to somebody, and that person's going to go on the street and they might get confronted at the ATM with somebody who wants to take their cash, and they're going to try something that they learned and it's not going to work. They're going to be totally, and I think that's the concern, at least the legitimate concern. I'm sure there's a lot of idiots out there, you know, a lot of BS people who are they're just looking for a fight to look for a fight. But I think that's the legitimate concern. How would you answer that concern?
Like whether or not something's going to work is going to really kind of depend on how well you train it. Like if you train it in that context, then it's going to work. Like every single time of combative teaching school, like even like, you know, when they teach you know, gun retention techniques and all this kind of stuff, like everything uses forms of like really quick and dirty forms of karate. Like all of them teach that. Like it doesn't matter if you're talking about Krav Maga or something else. Like all those techniques are in there. It's just what you decide to train and how well you decide to train it. Like how many people like saying that, it's really funny because like I get what you're saying. Like as if like, you know, if I taught Michael this stuff, right, and he was some stranger and I taught him and he went out and he tried to use it and he was unsuccessful. Okay, so then that then just you would then say, like some people would then say, well, then that discredits your style. Uh-huh. Okay, well, how many styles do I discredit from every guy who's ever lost an MMA match? How many schools of BJJ do I discredit for any guy who's lost an MMA match? How many gun makers do I discredit from any guy who's never hit an assailant with their damn gun? I mean, that's a good point. I mean, do you? Yeah, right. I mean, cops miss like from 10 to 15 feet away. That's where you start your qualifying act. Mm-hmm. You know, it all depends on the person. Like, I mean, you can train to hit and punch and all that kind of stuff somebody every day of your life, but out on the street, that's different. Out on the street, there are no rules. You know, like when I've gotten into tussles with people, like I've been winning and been on top of somebody and gotten a boot to my face. Well, I didn't train for that at that point in my life, right? You know, so I mean, that wouldn't discredit anything that I had learned prior to that, right? That would just mean like I lost initially when I engaged in that moment. Yeah. You know, so,
I guess and this is part of what I think you guys are attempting to put forward is some of the movements so they seem to be in karate, at least in the karate that I went to and explored, seem to be archaic, and they don't work. And so that's kind of what the backlash work is. So for example, that inward block I was talking about, I would never use that in a real fight. If somebody throws a punch at me, I am never going to load a full chamber, have my check, bring my arm up to a square, and bring it across my body, and then this hand back into chamber. And so I think, now I'm not saying you guys are teaching that, but that's the idea of what karate is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
the idea of this. And so somebody's looking at that and saying, oh, look, karate's legitimate. And they're saying, well, that's not what I would do. I mean, I can't think of anything. Or, you know, the overhead strike that you do your folded upward block for, that nobody ever throws and has never seen thrown in, you know, I don't know, maybe some years back. So do you understand is that part of the backlash that you've dealt with, and how do you come back at that, if you don't mind asking? And I'm not trying to be a dick here at all or anything like that, but I know that some people will ask that question, and they'll be like, why didn't you ask them that question? So I've got to ask. So
Yeah, that's
Well, our tagline is bringing back the old ways.
The old
right?
ways,
So
right,
we
yeah.
acknowledge that 99% of everything out there, karate base, is crap.
it's crap. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's garbage. Yeah.
and like our
okay.
seminar is spreading our drills that we've developed to help make this work. And
Yeah.
it's-
So like our application, generally speaking, of the majority of those techniques are rooted in the clinch range and use of like it's used for grappling. So those would be like a technique like that inside arm block.
Mhm.
Like to us, that's not a block. To us, that's like you scraping your arm across somebody else's like shoulder to their forearm to try to create like an arm drag position to get a better grip on somebody, or to shift your body away from somebody else to create a shield or something of that nature. But it's definitely not fist or a kick or anything of that nature, right?
Right.
Like all those techniques, even like the blocking from the other side, or blocking from the other side. It's just dragging your arm across somebody else's arm or face or head, because that's all that you have available to do at that point in time, right? Because if we're supposing that we're applying all that stuff from the clinch, then that's the range that you're using it. So so to us, the majority of that stuff is not blocking or receiving anything, right? It's
Right. So it is, and I would say that it is. I would say that it is trained wrong. That people have, because like I said, I saw this video a long time ago with this Gojo Karate, and he was using movements in the kata that I was like, well, that actually seems like it would work. You know, I'm like, I'm not. That's totally different than what my sensei is telling me this is for. And then going off and then doing sparring and using none of my kata movements in it, because like I said, well, we talked about that inward block, but then I saw the guy on this thing. It was more circular instead of coming at this angle like I'm swearing,
Right.
In court. It was more like this. And it was a circular motion. I got my microphone in the way. And those who are only hearing this, you got to go to the YouTube site and watch it. So it was a more circular motion, and he was showing that he had grabbed somebody and shoved them back and pow, banged them. And I was like, well, that would work. That would work. You know what? Something else that I thought of too. This is because after I watched some of your guys' videos, I thought, well, what if MMA existed in the past? Like, let's say MMA existed 100 years ago, and the only way to code those movements was through, a movement that somebody liked was through a routine. People didn't have, a lot of books, a lot of writing. There were, some people were artists, but, you tried to keep your family stuff secret, so you didn't like publish books and stuff. Really, the only way to show somebody was through was through movement and passing it on through this, through this catalog called Kata.
Yeah.
And what if MMA was in the past? And let's say somebody was shoving you up against the fence and they were doing a takedown and they wanted to preserve that. That would look really, really super impractical, just done in the air. That would look really impractical. Going down low on one knee and, scooping the leg up like that and dumping. That would look really super unpractical. And I bet within a few generations, it might be misunderstood as to something else.
Totally, man. That's exactly how I think it was created. I mean, even go a step further, and it's not MMA, but it's a life and death situation, right? So then you take the sport out of it, and you need to codify a way for your next generation to survive, to pass on their genes. Well, then you're gonna put it into a pattern that's easy to learn, that's very basic and very, very large gross motor skills, so that they can survive an altercation in real life, right? So definitely, I believe that's why kata forms in any styles were created.
Yeah, right. Okay. So final thoughts then on, before I ask both of you guys the final question, which I ask everybody, but your final thoughts on this bridge then that you're trying to put forward, making kata live, making it an actual legitimate self-defense. What would you say you would like to pass on? How do you think that's going to work in the future?
Well, our seminars are very much about showing drills that you can continue to build upon after we.
Okay.
Because the format in karate nowadays, the seminar is like, not being disrespectful, but an old guy goes to your school, he teaches you a kata that he knows, and then they spend the next couple hours moving the hand another inch to the right to make it look perfect, right? So, but then once the guy leaves, you try to memorize this kata, then you forgot the finer details, and then next week you probably completely forgot the pattern, right? So you pay however much that guy charges, and then you really get nothing out of it. So our seminars are very different in the point that it's tons of hands-on partner drills and tons of just explaining our concepts so that the people there can not only understand it, but they're feeling it, and then they can build upon those drills once we're gone. So I believe it's like the face-to-face is probably the best way to learn these things. Like our videos are like snippets of what we actually show. And I feel like, again, if you take hold of your training, like that's how it's going to grow, and you can't just take anything at face value.
So, yeah, definitely. Like hopefully at the end of our seminars, like people are able to take those ideas and then apply it to what they already know, and hopefully they can grow that way. That's really like kind of what we leave them with, like what we tell them, especially what we say at the end is like, take this information and try to see how it can expand what you already know and apply it to the things you already know, and then see what happens. Like check out what happens with it if you allow your body to move up and down, if you allow your strikes to become more fluid instead of so rigid, right? If you do it against a lot of resistance versus like no resistance, right? So all that kind of stuff, and hopefully that'll start kind of getting the wheels turning. People kind of change it into something that is really more applicable to like everyday kind of situations in life and that kind of deal.
We've been pushing a lot of this thing as well, like because you can learn things and you can memorize patterns, but if you don't understand how your body's oriented in that type of stance and that type of posture, then you're not going to be able to build upon that by yourself, right? You're always going to have to ask somebody else. You're always going to have to seek something else. But so we do a lot of ground mobility drills, like the animal crawls you see in jiu-jitsu, stuff like that. And it's not just to be better on the ground, but it's to see where your body's oriented at any moment in a three-dimensional space, right? And that's kind of missing in a lot of martial artists because they do their very technical looking punches, and then you put them outside of that box. Maybe you crowd them a little with your window. Like
Go
to
ahead.
whatever situation your opponent gives you, right? So.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I turned my camera off because you guys actually kind of been breaking up a little bit through the podcast, but I just let it go. But sometimes if I turn my camera off, you guys can, and you guys can be heard better. But so I'm just going to turn my camera off here for the last little bit of it, and actually, I can tell you guys are coming through a little bit better. So, final question for both of you. I want both of you to answer that. What is your top 3 training methods and or fight tips?
Top 3 tips?
Training methods, either your training methods or fighting tips, or if you had to pick 3 top to pass on to the audience, what would they be?
Oh wow, that's a big question. If you're not lifting weights as a means to understand your body, you got to start doing that. And I mean, like, not just throw around kettlebells. Kettlebells are good, but like Olympic lifts are very good for understanding your posture, understanding correct alignment. Think conceptually. That's a big thing too. It allows you to build your own catalog of techniques rather than just trying to memorize a list of things. I know I spent much of my youth trying to do that, trying to say, like, I know this movement in Kata and I memorized 5 different interpretations of it. Well, the reality is, if you understand concepts, you're going to be able to make unlimited amounts of interpretations of those movements, right? And then also question things for your own benefit. And I say that, like, not just in martial arts, but in everything else in life, because it's at the end of the day, it's your own personal growth. And if you just take things as they are, like, there's a lot of things you're going to miss out on just because you're not questioning why it happens. Even if it's right, you need to understand why it is right. So those would be
right. Okay.
Yeah,
and Aaron?
Yeah, so I would say, like, so visualization of your techniques and, like, the actual uses of your techniques is important. So, like, going over scenarios in your head, going over those repetitious movements over and over in your head, like how you would apply that in one situation versus another, in an open space, against the wall, on the floor, all this kind of stuff. Creating goals, like small achievable goals for whatever martial arts and things that you're doing, whether it be like lifting in martial arts, but creating small goals to, like, always, like, be striving towards, like, things that are like, can be met, not so much that they're super easy, but that you can get to in a reasonable amount of time. That kind of helps people, like, push forward and stuff, kind of a deal. And I guess, like, for the last thing is that, exploring other techniques and other martial arts is important for, like, your own. Like, it doesn't, and I'm not saying, like, anybody needs to dump their own style for any other, but they're all so closely related. And, like, the further you go back to, like, the more traditional those styles were, like, the more closely related they are, right? Because they all generally came from, like, the same area in the very, 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 very beginning, right? So, I mean, so looking at other stuff helps a lot. I mean, we looked at a lot of, like, Shaolin Long Fist and Hung Gar and Muay Boran and, a lot of jiu-jitsu videos and stuff on techniques, from a lot of guys, who've been around on YouTube and on the internet and other stuff. So it helps you hone your craft to see what everybody else is doing. And it helps you see, like, where your stuff may be missing and what you may be missing in your own techniques, right? Because sometimes it's there. You don't see it until you see somebody else doing almost the exact same thing, but under a different circumstance, right? And I think that's really important. People kind of miss out if you just kind of close yourself off and say, like, well, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do that because, well, I don't like it, or because they talk crap about mine. Well, who cares if they talk crap, man? Like, I mean, why let anybody like keep you from progressing just because they're saying stuff like, you know, it's like the whole thing, talk is cheap, you know, like it is. People should let other people hold them back just because of words, you know. It's kind of ridiculous. So.
Okay. All right, gentlemen.
Solid.
Thank you.
Solid.
Let everybody know where they can find you online, and any final thoughts.
You guys can find us at karateculture.com. Send us an email, karateculture@gmail.com, if you have questions. I generally answer questions within the week, and I get tons of questions. We get tons of questions on like, what's your interpretation of this, or check out my kata, or is this technique valid, etc. So we like that personal interaction with people who watch our videos, because it's not like we're an unreachable face on a screen, right? We're just two guys who just took the time to train, and now we want to share that knowledge with everyone else. So
right on.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have to work a full-time job right now, and Michael didn't either, I swear we'd be trying to meet everybody that we come into contact with, because we think it's cool to know, like, and we don't care like what style what run or training, you know, like I don't care if you're Kyokushin and you have a question about something, or you want our opinion on something, or if you are Wing Chun or Tang Soo Do or whatever, I don't care. Like, I mean, all those stuff, like they're really kind of the same. So yeah, we're not unreachable, and we're up for pretty much anything, right? So yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, gentlemen. Hey, hang on. I want to talk to you just a little bit off the air, so just hang with me here for just a second, if you don't mind. And I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. All right, we heard from Michael Nguyen and Aaron Garcia. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Please share this on your favorite social media and write us a good review if you think we deserved it on iTunes or Stitcher Radio or Google Play. We're on all kinds of platforms, so please do that if you think we deserve it. And you're welcome to follow us at Facebook/The Empty Cup Podcast, and on Twitter at Empty Cup Podcast. And if you're very brave, you can go to my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel is Ronin JKD. That's where you are going to see my sparring sessions, my rolling sessions, some of my tips and stuff like that, and some fighting tips, things of that nature. So please go over to Ronin JKD and hit that subscribe button. And until we meet again, please keep your gloves up.